Welcome to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast, brought to you by www.legaladviceinparadise.com. Even in one of the most beautiful places in the world, life can be litigious. On this podcast, the best and brightest legal minds gather to help you navigate your way through every legal question you may face. This program will help you know your rights, know what steps to take, and help you find the best legal representation, all in simple, easy to understand terms. And now, here's your host, Justine Gronwald.
Aloha everyone. Before we dig into part one of a two-part series with DUI attorney Paul Cunney, I wanted to invite you to our free Agent of Change membership, and it's simple to join. Just call or text your name and your email to area code 808-670-3400 and make sure that you text agree to get more messages from us. And when you join, you will automatically get tips on how to look for an attorney, which is really important. So it's free to join, and it's area code 808-670-3400. Text or call your name and email. Now let's get right into part one of a two-part series with DUI attorney Paul Cunney. Hello and aloha again, Agents of Change. This is Justine with Legal Advice in Paradise, and today's episode will be covering DUI. And I have Hawaii's top DUI attorney, Mr. Paul Cunney. Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your experience, and also your law firm?
Okay. Well, first of all, I started out practicing law in Massachusetts. You probably can tell by my accent. I actually passed the bar in 1973, and I practiced in Massachusetts and Florida from 73 till about 1982, and that's when I took the bar exam here. I passed it, and then I moved here in 84. Mm-hmm. And when I first started in Boston, my first job was a prosecutor's office, and I used to prosecute what they call six-person jury, not 12-people juries, six-person. They were quicker. And in the DUI, it was a misdemeanor. It wasn't like a felony where you needed 12 people to sit in deliberation. Mm-hmm. Cases would move faster, and so I got a lot of experience prosecuting the DUIs. And then when I came here and realized that at that time, in the late 80s, they were arresting almost 8,500 people a year statewide for DUI.
Back in the 80s, 8,500?
Yeah, it peaked in about 1988. 8,800 people were arrested in the late 80s. And
that's like 10% of the population, isn't it?
No. It's at that
Not
time.
10%.
No, at that time the population was probably closer to 500,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm thinking about today.
Yeah,
where it's like 800 something.
Yeah, no. It's
people.
probably like 1% of the population.
Yeah, 1%.
But currently, they arrest about 7,300 people a year in the state of Hawaii. They did it last year. They did it the year before, and the year before that, of which about 5,000 are on Oahu, which translates into about 100 a week.
That's a lot going in.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. But the people are just caught up with all the advertising, the fun times when you go out and drink Coronas or Heinekens or the Silver Bullet, and people go to a bar and it's difficult to stop at 2 drinks, 3 drinks. People have that 4th drink, the 5th, the 6th, and at that point it's too late. You can't get in the car and drive it and really drive home safely at that point.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's easy to get carried away.
Yeah, and people don't really intend to do it, but when they go out to drink, they have a couple, and then someone will say, "Oh, buy him a beer," and then you buy him one, and then there's someone else. So before you know it, people are buying beers back and forth. It's kind of a social thing, and once you get to that 3rd drink, I think that you're somewhat impaired as to what you can do and what you can't do, and then you make bad decisions.
Exactly, and I want you to cover that. And also, when people start innocently with beers, then comes the shots.
Oh, yeah, that's
The
even
shots.
worse. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then, you know, it's just a whole bunch of fun.
Yeah, well, the definition of driving under the influence says that a person's consumed alcohol sufficient to impair his normal mental faculties, comma, ability to care for themselves and guard against casualty. So the mental impairment is probably thinking that you can drive home even though you're still going to have to go 5 miles and you're going to have to, you know, go on the highway, and that's poor judgment at that point. Mental impairment can be, you know, slurred speech, or if the officer comes up and asks for documents and you give him your credit card instead of your driver's license.
Yeah.
Ability to care for oneself, that's the field sobriety test, when they ask you to get out of the car and to stand on one leg and count 1,000, 2 1,000, up to 31,000. Or if they want you to walk a line, an imaginary line or a line on the pavement, 9 steps down, 9 steps back, keep your hands to your side, make contact heel to toe, look at your feet. And those are tough tests. Some people, you know, can't pass those even if they've not even had a drip of alcohol.
Wow.
Yeah. It's really not an objective test. It's more very subjective because it's the police officer who's watching it and grading it. And if he's already smelt alcohol to get you out of the car, in all likelihood, he's probably going to err on the side of caution and arrest you unless you can pass that field sobriety test with flying colors.
Right.
Yeah.
And you hear that behind the siren. It's like perfect timing for an interview. You hear the siren?
I doubt it's a DUI at this time of day, but you never know.
This is middle of the day downtown, people. We are now at 2:09.
Yeah.
People should not be drinking.
Yeah, well, I think that's a big assumption.
Yeah, that was great, you know, background
That's
noise.
right.
But anyway, getting back to that, the whole purpose today like with all my interviews with attorneys, is that we take their area of practice and then we hone in. If someone finds themselves in your chair, like we're at your desk right now, this is where you would be sitting. What would you want from them, or what's the information? I took this from your website, and it says here, some questions you may need answered are, and here it says, if the arresting officer took my license, what can I do to get it back?
Okay. The whole area of DUI law in Hawaii changed in 1991. Up to that time, if you got arrested before 1991, you would keep your driver's license and you'd get a court date. And it was just the criminal side. And in fact, back in 85 all the way through to 94, you were allowed to have could have a jury trial. You could have 12 people decide your fate. Jury trials were granted under case versus State versus O'Brien in 1985, and at that point there was a run on the courthouse for trial dates for a jury trial. But then the tough administrative judge at that time, Wan Bei Chang, kind of told people, you know, in a memo that, hey, if your client's found guilty, I'm going to treat them seriously because the Supreme Court says DUI is a serious offense. So one by one, people kind of decided to make a deal and took a plea bargain. But I did take the first jury trial, and it went on for 7 days.
Wow.
It was a fireman was arrested by a motorcycle police off of Pauahi and Smith Street, and my client was parked legally, and he pulled out, and when he pulled out, he didn't see the officer come around the corner on the motorcycle, and the officer had a jam on its brakes, and the officer said, well, what's this guy doing? So he checked him out, and he felt he was under the influence, and we had a trial, and it went on for, like I say, 7 days, and I brought in an expert on the breathalyzer machine. It was on TV every night. It kind of put me on the map out here. And after 3 days of deliberation, the jury found my client guilty, but the case was overturned by the Hawaii Supreme Court because the judge didn't instruct the jury correctly on the intoxilyzer machine. In those days, it was called the breathalyzer. Now it's called the intoxilyzer.
Oh.
So we actually lost the battle but won the war. And we were allowed to have jury trials from 85 up to about 94. And in 1991, there were so many people driving around with a DUI with their licenses still in their pocket. The battle cry from Mad Mothers and some people was, let's get the drunks off the road. And so they created this law of the Administrative Driver's License Revocation Office, where the officer now, when he arrests you, will actually physically take your license.
Right.
If your license is valid, he'll give you a temporary permit to drive for 30 days, and within that 30 days, you're entitled to have a hearing to determine if the officer had probable cause to stop you, probable cause to arrest, was the machine working properly, is there a valid breath test result or a blood result in this case. So that's the origin of how people lost their licenses on the spot.
Wow.
And got a piece of paper saying they could drive for 30 days. That was the due process, to allow you to drive for 30 days and you could have a hearing. And at first, the numbers, I don't know what it was, so whether the police officers now at that point in 1991 became judge, jury, and executioner. Before that, they would arrest somebody and there would be the judge, or in those cases a jury could decide whether he was guilty or innocent. But the police just didn't like, there was a lot of extra paperwork involved, and I think they felt it was really up to the court or a judge or a prosecutor to decide whether the case should even be prosecuted, whether the judge would find him guilty, or a jury. And I don't think they liked the responsibility. So as a result, the number of arrests dropped dramatically from about 8,000 down to about 3,500.
Wow, that is drastic.
It is quite a drop.
In a short period of time.
Right, and then it just gradually it started to come back up, and they kind of simplified the paperwork, and now there's, like I say, there's about 7,300 a year, which is still considerable.
Yeah, for an island.
Yeah, so the DUI, when you get arrested now, basically I describe it to my clients as like driving down the road and you run to a fork in the road and the road splits. The DUI, the one DUI splits into a civil hearing, which is held down by the Humane Society. There's a little 2-story building down there by the Humane Society, Moiliili, and that's where all the driver's licenses are sent to, and that's where you have your hearing within 25 days. And then you have the criminal side. So they're coming at you two ways.
Wow.
There's an administrative revocation, and that's all they do at that revocation office. They either give you the license back if you can prove it wasn't a good stop or a good arrest, versus the judge, who has possibilities of giving you a fine, community service, jail. All three of them, 2 out of the 3 or 1 out of the 3.
Wow.
So the judge is more of a punitive thing, whereas losing the license for a year at the revocation office is more remedial. So they don't have the power. But actually, if a person doesn't take a breath test, the revocation office down at South King Street will take the license for 2 years, whereas the judge will only take it for a year. So it behooves a person to drink, but a lot of people, feel if I don't blow in the machine, if I don't walk the line or stand on one leg, they've got no evidence against me. So, and at that point, you can't consult with an attorney. It's a judgment call by the person who's under arrest, and the blue lights are flashing, and police officers are all around. And, what am I going to do? Am I going to take the test or not? So a lot of people, most of the people, I would say probably 85% take a breath test, and then about 15 decide to refuse.
Wow.
But if they refuse, the consequences can double as far as the license revocation.
Right. Wow. This I did not know.
Yeah.
Isn't that a good thing?
Well, it is a good thing you don't know.
I haven't done that. And then here's another thing. Am I still able to contest the stop and arrest by police?
Yes, you can, because that's the authority that revocation office has. Before they can uphold a revocation of the license, they have to look to see if there was probable cause to stop. In other words, did the officer have a good reason to pull the person over?
Like if they were swerving?
If they were swerving, if they were running red lights, if they were going 80 miles an hour in a 15-mile zone, if they got caught on a laser gun. A lot of these people, they drive when they shouldn't, and they'll swipe a parked car. And that's strong evidence that a person's under the influence, because it's the third element of under the influence is to guard against casualty. So if you get in an accident, it's pretty good proof for the prosecutor that you had something to drink and that you were probably impaired by what you did consume. So yeah, you can fight. You can fight. They've got to show that it was a probable cause. The stop was good, and the arrest was good. I've got a case right now that I just thought about. I was driving the car. I've got a case in Maui where no, actually it's on the Big Island. It's a professional person, athlete, and he stopped at a roadblock. And so when you get a roadblock stop, there's really no bad driving. Unless you drive through the cones or don't stop when they tell you. So usually you approach a roadblock, you see it ahead, you slow down, you pull up.
Right.
It isn't like the weaving or running red lights or stop signs and stuff like that. So the person pulls up, the officer says, I smell alcohol, and gets you out of the car. Now, the fellow that I have in Kona, they gave him the eye test. And I don't think the judges put too much stock in the eye test because, you know, the stimulus might not be held the right distance from a person's nose. You know, the officer's looking to see what they call involuntary jerking of the eye. But you can have that from if you're a welder or if you're a chemist and you're looking through a microscope, then you might have just a involuntary twitch in your eye. Or if you drink too much caffeine, or if you have some nervous disorder. There's a number of reasons why you can have a little twitch, a jerking of your eye, and it's not related to alcohol. So they don't put a lot of stock in the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. And the next test is to walk the line, 9 steps down, 9 steps back, keep your hands to your side, pivot to the left, and make contact between heel and toe. And then the last one is to stand on one leg and hold it up, and you count. It's the divided attention test where you count. You count 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, all the way up to 31,000. So my guy in Kona, number one, no bad driving because it's a roadblock. Number two, he's able to hold the foot up for 12. He puts it down, he picks it back up, and he holds it up to 30. And then the next test, to walk the line, the officer said, well, you know, we normally do it right there in the parking lot where Starbucks is, but we were a little bit mocha of that. It looks like they were maybe 10 yards or 15 yards mocha. So they didn't walk him down 10 yards into the parking lot. They didn't do the test at all. So there's no walk-and turn test on this guy. And then on the back of the form that they use for the field sobriety test, it talks about optional tests. And it says if for some reason either the walk and turn test or the one leg stand is not given, for whatever reason is not given, then you're supposed to give what they call a finger to nose test, or what they call the modified Romberg, where you lean back, close your eyes, and you hold that position for 15 seconds. And neither one of those tests were given. So on the test that he put his foot down one time, that's one clue. So he passed that test. You need 2 clues to fail. And they didn't give him the walk and turn test because they didn't walk him to Starbucks 10 yards away. And they didn't give the optional test. So there's 5 tests they could have given to him. They gave 2. He passed the one of the 2. So where's the basis to arrest this guy? Yeah, so I think this is a real strong case for the judge to consider throwing this case out. It's already been thrown out at the administrative side, but now I've got to go before a judge over in Kona and convince him that, you know, not every arrest is a good arrest. I would say probably 92% of the arrests are good, but there's that 8% that, and I tell the judges, I'm not in here fighting for my losers. My losers, I plead my losers out and try to get a good plea agreement for my clients, because if it's not a good case, then just, you know, you might as well close up shop and reduce the damage, you know. In other words, minimize your exposure and your loss by pleading and taking responsibility.
Yeah, that's good. And let me see. It says here, what will happen to me for driving without a license or auto insurance if I lose and don't fight my case? Will I go to jail if I get caught driving?
Well, here's what happens.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I hear there's a lot of people out there without auto insurance driving around and drinking all at the same time.
Well, I was on the governor's task force back in about 1995. They had just taken away the jury trial because they said the first-time offender could be rehabilitated, and therefore it wasn't really serious. He could learn. So my argument to the governor's task force was, well, why do we have this onerous insurance? You know, the SR-22 for first-time offenders, which meant if you got stopped and you were found guilty of DUI, you personally had to call Allstate or State Farm or Liberty Mutual, Geico, whatever, and tell them you had a DUI. And the lady would say, "Are you sitting down?" "Yeah, I am." "Yeah, okay. Well, it's going to cost you $5,000 a year for 3 years, $15,000, and if you don't pay it, you're not going to get your license back."
Wow.
So based upon that, people said, "Hey, I can't afford that."
Yeah.
So they just took the risk. So they went and drove, and they didn't have insurance, and they didn't have a license. So we corrected that in '95, and we also reduced the alcohol level at that time from 0.10 down to 0.8. So part of that negotiation with the legislature was to get rid of the SR-22 for first-time offender. So today we don't have an SR-22. SR-22 means you have to provide proof of financial responsibility. So besides insuring the car, now they want you to have insurance on you because you're a risk on the road. And that's so today an SR-22 might cost you $1,500, maybe even a little bit less on top of your car insurance.
Yeah, that's still...
Well, it is, but can you imagine when...
5,000?
Oh, yeah, no, and the insurance companies, it was all gravy for them, you know? I mean, in fact, if you drove a nice Corvette, I had people come in and told me it was going to be $9,000 a year for 3 years. Oh, yeah. So finally, as a result of that, and then part of my argument to the legislature was, we got 25,000 people in this state right now in 1995 that are driving around with no insurance and no driver's license. And driver's license is one thing, but to have no insurance, that's really a public safety issue.
Right.
Whereas, I mean, if someone collides into your car, you know, you hope that they've got insurance.
Yeah.
Either that, or as personal injury lawyers always argue, go out and get that underinsured motorist coverage. So if the guy hits you, doesn't have enough insurance, at least your insurance company will take care of it.
Right.
Yeah. So that's another thing. But
and as far
so
as
on,
this
so
part,
on,
yeah,
so on this part here,
will I go to jail?
Oh, you are. Yeah. If you have your license revoked at either the revocation office down by South King Street, that's the administrative side of the DUI, or by the judge, if you lose your license for 1 year, and you don't put that ignition interlock in your car, and we'll get to the ignition interlock.
Okay.
If you don't put that in your car and you get caught driving, 4 things happen, and they're all bad. Number 1, you go to jail. Minimum 3 days up to a year.
I was going to say, how long do you stay in there?
Minimum 3 days up to a year, okay? Number 2, you will have an SR-22. Number 3, you will lose your license to drive for another year. So instead of losing it for a year, you lose it for 2 years.
Wow.
And the 4th thing is, now you come to me and say, you know what, you talked about that ignition interlock that I could put in my car and drive for... Too late. It's too late to put it in. Yeah. So if you get a DUI and it's a bad DUI and you think you need to drive, how many people could really go a year without driving? You know, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Unless you live right across the street from your place of employment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of people chance it. I had a guy in court today. He got arrested in October, and he got caught driving in February. Now he wants to come in, and I hope he's telling me the truth. He's going to say that in the car when he was driving in February was his ailing mother and his girlfriend. I said, well, why didn't the girlfriend drive? She had a license. Well, she had stomach pains. She was pregnant, you know.
Oh.
And the mother had to go to the hospital.
And he was the only one.
So he's saying that he's taking his mother to the... Now, there is something in the law. If this man is telling me the truth, and I hope he is, there's a thing in the law called choice of evils defense. So in other words, you can commit an offense if the offense is going to prohibit a greater evil from happening, okay? So here, in this case here, he's committing the offense of driving without a license because his license was suspended for a DUI.
He's like an ambulance.
But the greater risk would be the mother would have severe complications in the car and would not be able to get to the hospital.
Right.
I suppose the judge could say, well, why didn't he call the ambulance? But then again, it might take the ambulance. You don't know where they live. It might take 15 to 20 minutes for the ambulance to get there.
Right.
You know? I suppose the same thing would hold true if if your wife was delivering a baby, you know, and you're home. Oh, I don't have a license. I can't take you, honey. Take me. What are you talking about? You know, like that. So
is that evil?
Yeah. Well, the choice of evil was that she'd have complications.
Oh,
and
yeah.
she could die. The baby could die.
Mm-hmm,
you know, that's a possibility. And so,
Wow.
so that it's very, very rarely used. I think in 40 years of practice in law, I probably have raised it 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
So it's really rare.
It's a rare.
So
rare defense.
watch the stories that you tell.
Yeah. I have. In fact, I have a not related to DUI, but I have a fellow that was at a party, and I think he got people upset with him, and he left, and these guys decided to chase him down the road.
Oh.
And when they were chasing him down the road, they kind of saw him running up into this bush, and one of them got out, and the guy had a baseball bat, you know, and they're coming at, and we're gonna get you, we're gonna beat you up or something.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So what's he do? He runs across the street, and he sees a light on at 4 o'clock in the morning. He starts banging on the lady's door. And the lady's looking, what's going on? I'm like, let me in, let me in,
she's
let
like,
me
no
in.
way.
Call the police like that. And she's going, no. And so he breaks the glass.
Oh, no.
He breaks the glass. She's calling the police.
Oh my goodness.
And so I guess the broken glass and her calling the police and all the commotion,
right.
the 4 guys took off.
Oh God.
So he's trying to use that as a choice of evils defense, that he had no intended to go in that, step on
But
that
he
lady's
had-
property to burglarize
He
her.
felt he had no choice,
He
or
thought- yeah.
he'd get beaten.
He was going to get beaten, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
we've talked about that case as a possible choice of evil. So
okay.
it comes up once in a while, but not very often. So
That's
don't rely on
interesting,
it.
though.
Don't rely
Yeah,
on it.
You hear that? Don't rely on it. Okay, and here we're gonna talk about this now. What is ignition interlock, and how does it work? I've never heard of it before.
Yeah. Well, I told you in 1991 the law changed where there was just not going to be an arrest by a police officer, and the fellow or the woman was going to keep her license until the case was adjudicated. So one of the problems was, once I won the first jury trial back in 1985, everybody started to demand jury trial. So when it came to about 1991, there were 3,000 people waiting for jury trial for DUI, and there was only one courtroom.
Oh my!
So, and I'll never forget this.
That is
And we used to do them right over here in the downtown post office. There was a courtroom up there, which there used to be the Intermediate Court of Appeals.
Is that Richard Street?
This is Richard Street, right out here. We're looking down on it here. Okay,
It's a beautiful view.
It's
by
a
the way.
it's a beautiful. It was the most gorgeous courtroom I think I ever practiced law in, because you had like 20-foot ceilings. The sun would be setting, you know, in the afternoon. It would come through these windows. You had big drapes. They actually filmed some movies in there. It was a classic. Courtroom, and eventually now it's been cut up into all kinds of pieces, being used, I think, by Department of DCCA, you know.
Oh yeah.
Consumer Affairs.
Consumer Affairs.
Yeah. And so we used to go in there, and I would probably have like 20 cases every Monday on the calendar, and I would go in, and I'd have maybe 3 or 4 of them. And I would always go to trial with one of my cases. So when I went to trial, we'd start trial on Tuesday, pick a jury, trial would go Wednesday, Thursday, and that would be it. We'd about get one case done. So the other 18 or 19 cases on the calendar would go back into the hopper.
Oh my!
So that's how the backlog got created.
That must have been just crazy.
So yes, and I remember standing there with Judge Hiroshi Oshiro, and he said to my client, he says, "I'm Mr. So-and-so," he said, we're kind of backed up. We're not going to get to your case today. We want you to come back in 1997 for your trial." And the guy said, "Judge, that's 6 years." He says, "I told you, we're backed up." So
wow, not joking, right?
No, he was serious. And cases were getting set in 1997. And that's when the Mad Mothers, you can ask them about the Mad Mothers, and the legislature said, let's get the drunks off the road. So that's when they changed the law. That was 91. But now in 2011, they decided to change the revocation period for the license. The license used to be, first offense, you would lose your license for 90 days, of which the first 30 was absolute no driving. Then for the next 60 days, you'd have a work permit to go to and from work. And then after the 90 days, you could get your license back. In 2011, they said, nope, instead of losing your license for 90 days, you're going to lose it for a year. It's going to be 12 months.
Yeah, I have the sheet here.
Right.
We're going to go over that
Right.
in a little bit. Yeah.
For 12 months, you'd lose your license for 12 months. And if you cannot drive, you can't get that work permit, you know, like it was. The only way if you lose your license for 1 year, there's only 2 ways that you can drive. One is to install this ignition interlock device in your car. And about 30 states, 35 states in the country have it. It's a little handheld device, and you blow into it.
No, before you go further, where
Yeah.
do you get this?
Well, there's a company called Smart Start.
Smart Start.
They
Okay.
came in, they're located from the mainland, but they're in California and they're in other states. There's probably some other competitive type of devices.
Okay.
But you have to put this in your car. It costs basically $175 to install it. That includes the first month. You sign a 12-month lease.
Oh.
And if you put this thing in your car, no matter what you blew in the machine, if you blew a .09 or if you blew a 3.3, it doesn't really matter. If you put this thing in your car and you maintain it and keep it in there for 12 months, you can drive 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the entire year.
How often do you...
You bring it in once a month to have it checked to make sure it's operating
Oh.
mechanically.
Okay.
It's got a little camera
Uh-huh.
to make sure that you're the person blowing into the machine. And secondly, also when you're bringing it every month, it has a printout to show how many times you tried to blow in the machine when your alcohol level was higher than a .02.
It makes you think twice before drinking and getting in your car if you're going to blow in this
Well,
thing.
yeah, especially if you're some area where you know the car's not going to start.
Yeah. I
Right.
mean, well, it makes you think not to drink, first of all, because you're going to have to blow in this thing.
Well, either or it talks about the designated driver.
Ah, designated driver.
Designated driver. Have someone
D squared.
right.
Yeah.
So if you lose your license for a year, you can drive, but only a car that has the ignition interlock in it.
Ah, I see.
It has to be. In fact, you have 3 cars. You can put ignition interlock into 3 separate cars.
Oh,
if you
while
want.
we're on the subject, here's my question too, and maybe some people are thinking about it. Say this happened to you, but you're driving someone else's car. What do you say to that person who owns the car? That is, you got somebody who got caught for DUI. Now you're letting them drive your car,
So wait a minute. Now, so if you had a DUI, let's say.
right? And say, let me borrow your car, and let me drive your car.
Well, then I'm responsible if I let you drive the car.
Ah.
I'm letting a person who I'm letting an unlicensed driver drive my car, so I could be charged. And if you got caught driving my car that does not have ignition interlock, that we go back to those penalties where you're going to go to jail for 3 days up to a year. You're going to lose your
Wow.
license for not 1 year but 2 years. You're going to have an SR22, which we talked about before, $5,000-$6,000 a year,
Skyrocket.
extra insurance, on top of your insurance for the car, and you won't be able to get an SR. You won't be able to get a ignition interlock in your car.
So in other words, don't let that person beg you to drive your car.
No.
Yeah,
no,
absolutely
no,
not.
No.
Better to be angry at that person than get possibly in deep trouble.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. If you've lost your privileges to drive, the only way you can drive during that course of a year is to install ignition interlock in your car.
Okay.
And it has to be in the car that you're driving. Because if you get pulled over and you're driving my car, they're going to say, where's your license? And you say, well, I have a permit to drive ignition interlock. And they'll go, look, yeah, but Mr. Cunney doesn't have ignition interlock in his car. Come on with me. You're under arrest.
Oh.
Yeah. Now, there's only one other limited exception to this.
The evil thing.
No. Well, that's a possibility, and I did use that on one of these cases. But no, the other one is to get what they call a EDP, an employer driving permit. If you drive a company car, let's say you drive for Xerox, okay? And your job is you're allowed to take the Xerox car home at night. Might be like a van or an SUV, because you have carry supplies. If the president of the company locally here signs a piece of paper saying Joe Smith is allowed to drive, but he only can drive for 8 hours a day. Let's say 7 in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, and it has to be specific to the car that Xerox owns. So you'd have the make of the car and the license plate. Everything would have to be Xerox. But a lot of people are afraid to go to the boss and let the boss know they got a DUI, so they don't ask for that.
Yeah.
But you know where I've used that?
That's a risk.
I've used that successfully, though, for some of these kids that work, like, say, at the Nissan dealership or down at the BMW dealership, and they have to mechanic or they have to move cars around the lot. The car dealers have been pretty good about that. And they'll give them that 8 hour, that 8 hour permit, 12 hour permit, 8 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, or 7 to 7, 6 to 6, whatever the hours are. And they're allowed to drive, but it has to be a car that's owned by the company. And probably it might be restricted to just driving like within a mile of the dealership.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This concludes part 1 of a 2-part series with DUI attorney Paul Cunney. Stay tuned for another episode for part 2. Aloha and mahalo.
Thank you for listening to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast. For more information, visit www.legaladviceinparadise.com.